Hi class, welcome to the next week of our class, and I wanted to record my own video. I gave you a video to Crash Course Philosophy, which gives you a very quick and I think entertaining overview of virtue ethics, and I did provide some content, and I think our reading is clear in its writings about virtue ethics, but of course contact me if you have any questions. But I wanted to supplement our week with a recording that I made as well. So, virtue ethics represents a unique and distinct moral theory that is started with Aristotle. And we're going to go over some of the key differences between virtue ethics and the ethical theories that we've studied so far. So, what we've been exploring is a range of ways of thinking about ethics. And I'd say the question that we keep coming back to is, what do we owe to one another? Okay, for instance, the utilitarians say that we owe it to others to create a world with optimistic consequences, the best balance of pleasure over pain in the world. Duty and deontology, we have a duty of beneficence, and we have, we should always treat ourselves and others as ends and never as mere means to an end. So that all has to do with what we owe to one another. Okay, we have rights-based arguments that are integral to the social contract theory. That's kind of essentially, there's this argument that we should always respect human rights, and we are in the wrong whenever we fail to do so. There's fulfilling moral duties to others, like the deontologist. Always treat others as an end and never treat others as mere means to an end. So we have these moral duties that we owe to others and ourselves. And then the utilitarian, promoting happiness for all people. This all has to do with what we owe to one another and to ourselves. Some things that moral theories try to do, and this has been consistent throughout this class, is they try to provide a moral bedrock. So we've been looking at absolute moral principles, and most of the theories that we've looked at have said that there is a moral bedrock, an absolute moral principle, such as the categorical imperative for the deontologist. So duty ethics says that duty is a fundamental moral concept. That should ring true for deontology and utilitarianism. Both of them hold that we have these fundamental duties that we must adhere to. Rights ethics says that human rights are most basic, and so whatever we do, we cannot violate them. We must always protect them. And then pragmatism, which this relates to the moral pluralism that we've looked at earlier, says that there's no one type of value concept that is basic. Rather, there are a range of moral values. Okay, so, but all these theories have tried to find some kind of moral bedrock, a foundation on which we can think about right and wrong. Moral theories also try to help us resolve dilemmas. Now, we saw with moral pluralism that maybe we can't resolve moral dilemmas. Sometimes we have competing moral concerns, and it's up to the individual to choose one over the other, and we have to be sensitive to the situation. But prior to that, we saw a number of moral theories that did provide a framework for resolving dilemmas, like act for the greater good if you're a utilitarian, apply the categorical imperative if you're a deontologist, understand what God has commanded and follow that commandment for the divine command theorist. These moral principles help us choose when we are faced with a dilemma. And they provide rules and contexts. Okay, and they also have us question to what degree we should be partial and to what degree we should be impartial. So for instance, utilitarianism says that you should be absolutely impartial. Every individual affected by an action receives equal consideration. So when we add up the pain and pleasure that is caused by our action, we don't give preference to anybody. If I have to sacrifice my own family member because it's the only way to create greater happiness and less suffering in the world, then I should do that because I should not be partial to my own family member. And we saw other theories that reject this. Ethical egoism says you should be absolutely partial. You should prioritize your own interests over the interests of others. But all these theories try to resolve these different try to provide an answer for these different issues. Virtue ethics gives us a different perspective. It is a unique moral theory. Instead of considering what should I do, virtue ethics considers what sort of person should I be and what sort of life should I lead. So virtue ethics is not about basic moral duties. It is rather a case study in character. It's often referred to as a character ethics. So the concern is who you should be. Okay, so what kind of character you should develop, and what a good life is, and how, what kind of character you should develop in order to lead a good life. Okay, so we'll find in Aristotle that we don't just consider, trolley problems and, moral dilemmas, but I mean, Aristotle is he talks a lot about having parties and having enough friends and things like that, because those all contribute to the good life, and they all relate to the kind of character that you have. Someone with good character is probably going to have quite a few friends, and is probably going to be trusted and respected in their community. So those things become very important, not just what should I do in this situation. Okay, so duty ethics, which we've been studying so far, is concerned with the deontic, the right, the wrong, the obligatory, the forbidden. It really has to do with what your moral duties are. And virtue ethics is aretaic, which means that, the kind of terms that it is concerned with is the virtuous, the good, the admirable. Okay, so it's not so much about deciding right from wrong, but developing a strong character and being an admirable person in society. Okay, so Nicomachean Ethics is Aristotle's major work on ethics. And it considers ethos, or the customs of a society. He identified a number of virtues that are important for living the good life, but it's not like a set kind of theory. Those virtues that he identified were important for the good life in his time and place in history. But we can, of course, develop those and add to the list and maybe take off some of the things from the list. And that's been the case. People who studied virtue ethics, have adapted it to Christianity, for instance, adding some virtues that are important for the good Christian life, for instance. Okay, so your customs, your society, your time and place in history is important for understanding what a good life is and what good character is. Okay, so he's not going to have any sort of rules that this is what a good character is in all times and places in history. Rather, the virtuous life is going to be relative to what it means to thrive in your society with its customs. Okay, so it's concerned with ethics as ethos, customs of a society. And Aristotle thought that we always pursue the happy life. So we've studied this with hedonism. The happy life is intrinsically good. Okay, so everything else is an instrumental good. Being a good student, for instance, is instrumental for leading a good, happy life. That you do it to achieve happiness and not to do it for its own sake. Aristotle agreed with that, but happiness is not mere pleasurable feelings for Aristotle. The happy life is the eudaimonious life, which can be translated as eudaimonia can be translated as like a good spirit. Okay, and that's the life that is the goal. So happiness, the eudaimonious life might be full, not full, but might periodically experience great displeasure. Someone loses a loved one. That it's not to say that they aren't living in a eudaimonious way, in a happy way, in their Aristotelian sense, because somebody with strong character and virtue, when they lose a loved one, endures that pain and suffering admirably. Okay, so there's this sort of deep-seated happiness in the eudaimonious person, that isn't just mere pleasure, which can be fleeting. Okay, so that's the goal for Aristotle, is eudaimonia, or this good, strong spirit that is always with you, regardless of what kind of circumstances you found yourself in, or what kind of pain and suffering you might be enduring in any particular moment. Now, a eudaimonious life, I would argue, it has more pleasure in it than pain. Okay, but the key point is that when we talk about happiness in the Aristotelian sense, we are not talking about a fleeting kind of feeling. We're talking about a state of being that remains with somebody. And it is the goal. His theory is teleological, meaning it's goal-driven. So he thought that every kind of substance in the world has some reason for its being. Okay, like a computer's reason for its being is to produce PowerPoints and record these lectures, for instance. That would be like a final good, something that it is when it does it, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And similarly, a fan is achieving its final goal, or its telos, when it is, flapping its arms, or its arms around and causing you to be cooled. Okay, I'm not sure if a fan's things are called arms or not, but you get my point. So he thought human beings had a telos as well, or a goal, or a reason for their being, and that was to experience eudaimonia, or this deep-seated happiness that is characteristic of the virtuous person and the virtuous life.